Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to present on the FDA approach to the ever-changing landscape of substance use, and what are some of the actions that, how we are thinking about it, and what are some of the actions that we have been working on to implement to address some of those issues. I would like to, again, thank the organization for inviting us here. And I will be presenting information on behalf of these are my reflections, but I'll be representing FDA actions, or speaking about FDA actions. And I do not have any conflicts of interest to disclose. So as presented just a minute ago by Dr. Dart, the patterns or patterns of substance use have been changing over the last years, decades. This is a slide presenting data from CDC regarding drug overdose deaths in the United States. And as you can see, there was, this actually represents drugs by drug class, but overall, when you look at overall drug deaths, we see increased deaths. And at the beginning of COVID, we've seen a really sharp increase. And recently, it seems like it's stabilizing, maybe even decreasing. And yes, we are very excited and hopeful, but let's face it, we still have over 107,000 deaths within the last 12 months. So it's still, there's a lot of work to be done. As we are looking at the specific patterns and really diving into it, yes, again, it was mentioned before, it appears that the synthetic opiates of illicit fentanyl typically, or analogs related deaths, appear to be decreasing in the last few months. Also, the deaths related to the natural and synthetic opiates, typically associated with prescription opiates, also appear to be decreasing, as well as heroin. However, the deaths related to cocaine or psychoactive substances with abuse potential, typically it's methamphetamine, seem to be still stable and still very high. And looking at some data from the National Survey of Drug Use and Health, I figured that the latest data was just presented recently. So looking at some of the data that was just published from NASDAQ from 2023, when we are looking at the past year illicit drug use among people aged 12 and older in 2023 in US, what's intriguing, it's about a quarter of the population reports past year illicit drug use. So it's a fairly large number. It's fairly consistent across the years, with marijuana or cannabis having the largest share of that reporting, followed by hallucinogens, prescription pain medication, and then we have the other medication, including tranquilizers and sedative medication misuse, prescription stimulus misuse, and so on. Interestingly, looking from year to year, from 2022 survey to 2023 survey, it seems like generally the numbers are slightly decreasing, except for hallucinogens and methamphetamine. So what about the initiates? Yes, even though we might be seeing some trends in decreasing, we also have a lot of people who within past year initiated drug use. And again, that includes in the lighter bars the substances that are legal, such as nicotine vaping, alcohol, and cigarettes and cigars, and especially nicotine vaping and alcohol use initiations, the two highest categories, marijuana being shortly behind. But we also have a number of people, over 1.4 million, that initiated misuse of prescription pain relievers, and about 252,000 people who initiated, for instance, sedative misuse. And it also leads to substance use disorders. And again, we are seeing that the largest class is alcohol use disorders, followed by marijuana use disorder, prescription pain relief use disorder, methamphetamine, prescription stimulants, cocaine, and heroin. So what does that mean for FDA? right? So these are just the review of some of the data from SAMHSA, but within FDA and overall as part of HHS and government approach, we've been working on addressing the overdose prevention, not only focusing on opiate overdose, but really looking at it more broadly as drug overdose. This FDA overdose prevention framework was released in 2022. Where we focus, it's very much aligned with the HHS overdose prevention strategy, where we translate the strategy into FDA speaking authority, where we focus on 4 main areas. One is how we do support primary prevention. And in FDA speak, we focus on eliminating unnecessary initial prescription drug exposure and inappropriate prolonged prescribing. Then we focus on harm reduction initiatives, then advancing development of evidence-based treatments for substance use disorders, and fourth, protecting public from unapproved, diverted, and counterfeit drugs presenting overdose risks. So focusing on opiates, again, this framework is much broader than opiates, but opiates have been our emphasis and focus for quite a long time. And I'm just presenting some select actions within the last year or so, so 2023, mostly 2024. The primary actions that we've been focusing on in 2 buckets. One is focusing on increasing disposal. In April of 2023, FDA announced that it's requiring manufacturers of opioid analgesics dispensed in an outpatient setting to make prepaid mailback envelopes available to outpatient pharmacies and other dispensers as additional opioid analgesics disposal options for patients that need it. So this is something that we are very much excited about working with on implementing it. At the same time, we are also exploring other disposal options. And for instance, we held, FDA funded and participated in a national Academy of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine workshop on in-home disposal options to better understand these options and how could they be potentially utilized if appropriate for as additional part of a disposal framework that we would like to implement. But at the same time, as we are working on disposal, we also announced new safety label changes for opioid pain medicines, both for immediate release as well as for extended release formulations. Essentially emphasizing that for immediate release formulations, for certain conditions on a few days of the medicine of opioid pain medication could be sufficient, and for extended release formulations, emphasizing that for the that medication, because of the risks, it should be used for only for patients with severe and persistent pain. Oh, sorry. Oh, wrong way. And also as part of our actions, we are also supporting development of clinical practice guidelines that will help to promote the appropriate prescribing. And just one that I wanted to highlight is the fact that FDA-funded clinical practice guidelines on benzodiazepine tapering. So yes, we are taking some actions regarding benzodiazepines as well. When we had a number of consultations and stakeholder meetings, we really emphasized the challenges in tapering people that are on benzodiazepines for a long time. So I really wanted to emphasize that based on the prior talk, but we are also funded clinical practice guidance that have been released for regarding dental pain, both for patients, for children, as well as for adolescents and for adults. And these guidelines have been released. And we also awarded 2 new guidelines, grants for 2 new guidelines on low back pain and post-op pain after laparoscopic abdominal surgeries. So, stimulants. It was mentioned in the previous talk, the patterns that we are seeing regarding stimulants prescribing and some of the patterns regarding related risks. So first and foremost, I wanted to highlight that we understand that untreated ADHD among adults is associated with significant harms, and I think that that's something that really has to be highlighted. And also the other point that I like to make is that there are multiple treatment options for people to treat people with ADHD, and there are both pharmacological treatments as well as non-pharmacological treatments. And within pharmacological treatments, we have stimulants and non-stimulant treatment. So there is a fairly broad range of treatments. However, the stimulant treatment by many organizations is considered as the first line of treatment. So it might not be surprising that when we are looking at dispensing of stimulant and non-stimulant treatments for ADHD, we see that there is a fairly rapid increase, or it's a steady increase of stimulant dispensing. Frankly, the increase is both in stimulant and non-stimulant medication, but because there are about 90% of the treatments are for stimulants versus 10% for non-stimulants, the increase, the actual numbers of that in millions of prescriptions is much greater for stimulant medication. So there are a number of questions: what is driving it? And regarding the actual dispensing, the stimulant dispensing is mostly for pediatric population. It seems to be relatively stable. Where we see the increases is for adults, and predominantly also for female populations. The age group 31 to 50, you see a fairly large increase, predominant increase, but also in the group of 17 to 30 years old. So some could ask why. It could be a great thing. It could be that finally the people that need the treatment get access to the treatment and get recognition of their symptoms. But there have also been reports that there are potential for, some call it perfect storm, for inappropriate prescribing. We know that during COVID, there was a relaxation of telehealth flexibilities that resulted in initiation of some telehealth platforms that potentially could, though obviously doesn't have to, provide inappropriate prescribing. And some of it was being picked up and described in a number of different news articles, a lot of them pointing to social media, such as TikToks, where there were some quick and easy guides on what do you need to do in order to get ADHD diagnosis and prescription for Adderall, for instance. But again, just because it occurs in some situations, it's not to say that telehealth is not appropriate for everybody. There is definitely a number of people that benefited also, because access to some of the providers might be very limited, particularly in special areas. And one item that I wanted to mention is that just recently, Department of Justice filed an indictment and against two executives and for one of the platforms, alleging that they generated over 100 million in revenue, arranging for the prescriptions of over 40 million pills, and they're referring to Adderall. So how do we manage the benefits and risks? Because obviously both are critical. We have a number of clinical practice guidance regarding pediatric ADHD diagnosis and treatment. There's far less that we know regarding the adults, or there are no US clinical practice guidance regarding adult ADHD diagnosis and treatment. And at the same time, looking back at the NASDAQ data, we also know that when we are looking at the prescription stimulants misuse, there's also quite significant overlap between those who are using stimulants alone, prescription stimulants alone, or prescription stimulants together with cocaine, or prescription stimulants together with methamphetamine, or all three combined. And that doesn't even talk about co-use with other substances, CNS active substances. So again, this is a complicated picture. The point that I'm trying to make, that it's a complicated picture. How do we make a sense out of it and really help to support the patients and the prescriber with appropriate use of this medication without presenting them with additional unnecessary risk? So what have we done? So in last year, in April, FDA required updates to to labeling for prescription stimulants, Schedule II prescription stimulants to treat ADHD and other conditions, really synergizing and making sure that we have similar wording regarding the risks related to misuse, abuse, diversion of prescription stimulants. But at the same time, we also engage with medical community and trying to better understand, especially the adult ADHD diagnosis and system and treatment paradigms. So we funded and participated in some workshop on adult ADHD diagnosis, treatment, and drug development. We also scheduled listening session to better understand this landscape, and funded AHRQ evidence-based reports on diagnosis and management of adult with ADHD, as well as regarding use of misuse of prescription stimulants. So based on that, one area that we have learned loud and clear is that there are major issues related to shortages of prescription stimulants. And that's what I really wanted to emphasize, that it was something that we have learned throughout the engagement. And just to recognize, as of October of 2022, we have FDA announced shortage of Adderall. In July of 23, methylphenidate and lisdexamfetamine. And throughout the time, we've been working with DEA and our other federal partners to really try to address this issue. We issued joint letter. I have it in here that it's actually DEA that issued additional letters recently to really help change the way quota is being allocated. At the end of last year, it was changed from annual to quarterly. Now it's changed from quarterly to semi-annual to make it easier on the manufacturers to produce these products. And again, this just represents that what I wanted to stress is the fact that we recognize that there are problems with these issues, and we want to make sure that we have it, that people are aware that we are working on it to the degree that we can. Focusing on the second part of our framework, which is harm reduction, that's where within the last couple of years we've been really focusing on increasing access to overdose reversal agents, both prescription and non-prescription, and also diverse agents, to really make sure that both patients, harm reduction groups, clinicians have as many tools as they can in the toolbox to address this issue. We also announced shelf life extension for Narcan nasal spray from 3 years to 4 years. Again, listening to some of the feedback that we have received, that it was one of the barriers. So we are limited by data that we have, but we were able to extend it at least for new Narcan from 3 to 4 years. Regarding evidence-based treatment for substance use disorder, I think that many would agree that we don't have too many new treatments coming up. We don't have, and I wish I would have a full slides of new treatments that were approved within last year. Unfortunately, the pipeline is not as robust as we would want to, despite the needs, as mentioned earlier. So we've been engaging with various stakeholders to figure out what are the barriers. We issued guidances, particularly on stimulant use disorder treatment development to really help to develop it. We approved the first generic naltrexone for treatment of alcohol and use disorder, which is the injectable one, which we are hoping is going to make a difference. We also engage in discussion regarding high-dose buprenorphine needs. Again, hearing from the community that in time of fentanyl exposure, that doses 24 milligrams and higher might be needed, and we've been working across the government in order to really better collect some of the data. We had listening session, for instance, with the tribal community as well as with other stakeholders to better understand the need and what are the barriers. And then last pillar is protecting public. So that's where the dynamic landscape is really critical to understand, because we are trying to really address our actions as quickly as possible to really to recognize them. So there were a number of actions within 2023 related to xylazine exposure, including a workshop that we co-hosted on mitigating the risks in human exposure. Xylazine is a medication approved for veterinary use, but not for human use. Yet we know that it is in drug supply and has really dire consequences for those who use it. We had consumer alerts regarding tioneptine products. We funded studies to better understand the abuse potential of kratom, which is another substance that is unregulated. And we also co-hosted a meeting on addressing availability of and demand for online demand for controlled substances online. And just very briefly, I really applaud you to go to the RUF website to listen to some of the presentations. Just few things. What I found very informative during the meeting is the fact that how many pharmacies there are online, and what are the people's perceptions regarding these pharmacies, of the fact that there are a lot of misconceptions regarding some of the pharmacies. It appears, based on research that was presented at the meeting, 54% of Americans have previously purchased medication from online pharmacy for themselves or from others, and 71% of them done it within the last year or two, which means likely the trend is only increasing. And also, people have perceptions that these online pharmacies are actually regulated, and many of them are not. And I think that that's part of a misconception that I think it's important that we address more broadly. And the question is, how do we best address those misconceptions? And this was another project that was presented at the meeting, and I found it very, very informative for a variety of reasons. They asked young people, not about pharmacies, but regarding the information, how they get information regarding fentanyl and counterfeits. And they asked, what is the current source of information? And you can see, internet is the source of information. But one thing that I found particularly intriguing is the fact that we have all the list of different sources of information. The one on the bottom is government. Well, and then they asked the same group of patients, and again, this is online survey of young people in oh my goodness, what is the state? It will come to me. So they asked them, what are the trusted sources of information? And again, similarly, government is well, not the last one, but we are very close to the bottom. So it brings the question, if we want to confirm our information regarding how the safety of fentanyl or about the pharmacies, should we put it on FDA website, or should we work with partners to figure out who would be the trusted messenger for the people who would actually be more likely to understand and follow? So with that, what's next? We are tracking the data. We are really trying to stay at least not 10 steps behind, really trying to understand and act accordingly as much as we can regarding some of the trends that I have reported today. And just acknowledgements, I want to say a big thank you to Caroline and to Hillary for helping me to put together the presentation, and the CEDAR team, because they are the ones who are doing all the analysis, putting together the actions that I can present to you during this meeting. So with that, thank you very much.